Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to start what's going to be a four-part series on where you can implement AI and automation together. You know, when we started putting this together, we were actively working on our partnership with our friends over at Thread on some other things that we were doing. So kind of took the idea of taking their pirate theme here a little bit. So let's talk about where you can use AI and automation and find gold where those two things meet. So I want to just welcome Karl Bickmore, our CEO over here at Raven, as my co-host today for this webinar. And of course, my name is Jared Brantley. I'm the Chief Automation Officer here at Raven. Before we go too far, I just want to start out and explain, it's a common misconception that people tend to think that AI and automation are the same things. My good friend Aaron Chernin gave a fantastic definition of both AI and automation a few months ago at a conference here at Flow in Tampa. And while I am nowhere near as eloquent as Aaron is, this is kind of what Aaron said. What is automation? Automation is basically any repeatable procedure or process where you can predict the outcome, and that process is triggered by some set of predefined events or conditions, or in many cases it's triggered by a person or a technician or something to that effect.
Jared, I have a favorite way of adding to this, which is people think of automation and they just think anything that happens without a person is like magic, so it must be AI, right? That's kind of what you're alluding to. But what I like to say is a lot of times automation doesn't need intelligence. It just needs the input and has a predictable outcome, right? That's I love this definition. It really gets to the heart of it.
Yeah, so like common examples of automation. You walk into a public restroom at a concert and the lights automatically turn on. There's a sensor in there that senses your presence and turns the lights on. Just one of the many common examples that are out there. If we think about that from the MSP perspective, you've been doing automation for years. You've got RMM tools that are out there, and some of the common things that you and your team members have been doing are simple things like restarting a print spooler when the service fails. Maybe you're deploying AV software as you onboard a new client. You're uninstalling the old and you're installing the new. Maybe you're doing some simple maintenance tasks like running disk cleanup as disk drive is getting full. Maybe you have some semi-complex PowerShell scripts to perform different tasks on an endpoint. All of these are examples of straight task-based automation. These are going to be scripts that are initiated by people on your team, or maybe you've identified a set of conditions or a monitor, depending on your RMM tool, that cause these processes, depending on what's going on in the environment. But when we bring RPA into this, for those that aren't familiar, RPA is simply robotic process automation. This is the concept of having a bot or some other orchestrator that can basically automate a series of tasks across multiple systems. And these tasks can make up much larger processes overall. Some of the common examples for this would be the classic user onboarding and offboarding. This is almost always the first thing that every MSP wants to get automated because it's always a huge pain point for everybody. Karl, I think you and I can both relate to that as we've talked about this numerous times.
Well, I think a key element is like that's one of the most common change processes where we implement something that was different than it was before, either at provisioning or even at termination. And it's also, a kind of a high importance piece for the client because they want to put on their best, experience for the new user, give them a good start, not a bad taste from the beginning, and impress them with like a smooth operation of a ready to go system when they first start with all the things operating. And it's something that's a little bit kind of unique per customer too, which makes it its unique challenge also. But it's definitely something it feels like it can be more automated. and then it's a place that we commonly make mistakes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Other common areas, billing reconciliation. That plays a tremendous role to the bottom line for any organization, making sure that you're billing for all of the SaaS tools that you have out there. We do tons of this kind of work over at Raven, helping clients get all of their billing in order.
Yeah, it's really a
Automated,
function. It's really a function that our tools that help us bill for this stuff that has some level of, automation in the billing are just oftentimes wrong. And it's kind of like a dirty secret of our industry that there's all this extra work that we have to do just to make sure the bill is correct and things are properly deployed. It's actually a huge mess, and it's a great way. Yeah, I'm a big fan of working on improving reconciliation.
well, the challenge for the individual SaaS vendors is they can't possibly account for all of the different scenarios that the MSP may use to bill.
Yeah.
Some MSPs may bundle those products together as a single SKU. Some may bill for each thing independently. So there's a lot of different ways that that could be handled. Some may bill for a SKU for one rate for one location. They may have a different rate for different locations or different geographic territories, things like that. So there's a lot involved in that they can't possibly account for. But the
100%.
beauty of RPA is you can build whatever you need for that.
Well, and I find that either we like decommission something, but we continue to bill for it, and so we're not getting charged for the client is. That's not right. Or we provision it and forget to tell somebody, or something doesn't quite work right, and so we've deployed it and we're getting charged for it, but we're not charging the customer for it. I mean, both happen. It's our tools make this way too easy to make these mistakes. So
For sure. Then you've got automated triage and dispatching, or automated ticket responses and things like that. Those repeatable alerts that you might get from some of the different tools that you have in your organization. Those are all really common, relatively easy to do process-based automations that you can do with RPA. Now, artificial intelligence. AI itself is not automation. In the most basic sense, AI is just simply the concept of teaching a computer to think and act like a human. That's really all that we're doing. We are teaching a computer to behave like one of our people, albeit in this case, a person that never needs vacation or a time off or a pay raise. So those are always nice things.
yeah, I like
Now,
to say it simulates acting or thinking like a real person, because it doesn't actually think. It's just predicting what word is most likely next is the most basic
absolutely.
level of how it works. Yeah.
So when we merge AI and automation, the AI, if you recall, we mentioned that oftentimes those automations have to be triggered by a person. Well, that's where AI really comes into play. The AI can become that person that essentially launches that automation to perform that process or resolve whatever that issue may be, or to analyze that ticket, et cetera. And you've really got two primary methods that you can really begin to start to implement these things. You've got the build it yourself approach, where you can kind of go out, get your own LLM, start building your own code and processes, or you can buy purpose-built tools. Now, we're going to kind of go through a couple of quick little videos here outlining some of these concepts. So the first, this method is essentially a low-code, no-code tool. This is just an RPA tool. I'm going to pause this for a second. So what you see here, if we back this up, the very first thing that we're doing in this process, we're setting the LLM. We're getting our maximum token counts here. So basically all of this is part of that AI model configuration and token limit setup. As this continues, the next thing that we're going to do is we have some sub workflows that we've built in here where we're going to get variables and ticket information out of the PSA. We're going to pull some ticket notes out of that. After we go through that process, the next thing that we're going to do with this is we're essentially going to pass this down and pull out some of the ticket priority and configuration information out of our PSA. In this case, well, my video went a little too far. In this case, this one supports multiple PSAs. So we've got Halo and ConnectWise referenced here. But we're going to go through and we're going to pull the individual impact and urgency information so that the AI knows exactly what it is that's going to configure in this process. After we move through that, we have our AI model using the RPA here, where we're going to take that ticket analysis and we're going to assign a priority. And we're going to go pass that back through and set an initial note for that ticket. Of course, we also have some error handling that we've got. So, with any automation, there's always the chance that something could go wrong. So we need to be able to account for that. So if we get any kind of error throughout this process, we need to make sure that we let our human counterparts know that we encountered an error so that we can react accordingly. So we've got error handling that's been coded into this. And then of course, after we go through that, there is this process here where the actual workflow ends. And in this case, this is just simply an AI triage agent that's written using a combination of OpenAI with an RPA tool. So this integrates with the PSA, OpenAI, and of course, Roost is the RPA tool. So this is an example of kind of building it yourself. Right. And there are.
Jared, I want to back up for just in case there's somebody that doesn't always fully understand. At the very beginning, you had it get token count. Tell us a little bit about how tokens are and why you wanted to get that count, because this is something like the common mistake I think an AI novice might make if they haven't been, working with AI yet.
Yeah. So, different AI models have different ways to approach billing. And the most common method is a tokenization model. Tokens can have different definitions for different AI tools in terms of what a token means. In some cases, a single token could be a commonly occurring phrase. In other cases, for less frequently occurring words, it could be multiple tokens for a single word. So what we need to do is understand kind of the cost perspective of what we're going to pass through, so that we know exactly what we're sending into the AI model, essentially. That's really where the tokenization comes into play. It's all about kind of cost and what we're passing through.
Yeah, it's a big deal. A lot of folks haven't thought about that when they start working with AI. The other thing that's I think the real key here, and I know we're getting to this as we go here, but we're using an RPA tool to call upon an AI to then do something. And this is like a big missing piece for a lot of folks. It's like they think, well, why do I need RPA? Because I got this AI and I can do agentic things. And what does that mean? But the reality of it is when it comes to the execution and connecting systems together, AI struggles with this. Maybe one day there'll be a greater blend in all these functional capabilities, but really, if you want to get this working, say in your IT company with all these different tool sets, you need to marry it with the RPA tool. That's the real secret here, like that we're talking about today. It's like you kind of need both to do probably all the things that you want to do. Some things don't need the AI component. You can just execute automation, but you can certainly weave AI in, and now you got the best of both worlds, right?
Absolutely. And there are other ways that you can manipulate systems with AI when we start talking about MCP servers and things like that. That content, of course, is prepared for later in our webinar series here. As we're really just kind of scratching the surface for some of this. But yeah, I mean, you still have to have some method to allow the AI to interact with your systems. For us, our most common method is RPA.
Right. But what I love about this particular example is I think anybody who has to receive requests from a customer and then triage it so it can get sent to the right technical resource to help resolve it, or whoever needs to handle that issue, that triage process is something that's like a thorn in our side. It's like it's difficult to find the right mix. Do we go technical? Do we go non-technical? You go non-technical. Do they understand and actually triage correctly? If you use technical resource, is it a waste of their talent because they're not really doing a lot of technical work? They're just kind of categorizing, documenting, and moving along. And so this is such a cool use case for how the intelligent side of AI can help us do these tasks that sort of take that load off of somebody's plate, and it, one, happens faster, which is actually one of the biggest problems, and then two, is more reliable, I think.
Now, this is an example of part of our predefined automations out of our catalog. There's approximately 80 to 90 hours of development work behind this and the sub workflows that actually power something like this. If you're doing this from the ground up and you've never done it before, you could easily triple the amount of time required to build something like this as you're learning and going through that process. That's kind of where that build it yourself concept comes into play. Now, when we go into more of a purpose-built tool approach, so let's pause our video here. So in this case, what we're going to do is show an example of using a chat support tool to call an automation to set up a mail forward. So the first thing that you're going to see here is, one, I'll show you that there is no forward actually set up on this mailbox. As this plays, you're going to see that we'll switch over to my emulator so that you can see, exactly how this works. We're going to put in a message. I've got some errors in there, like leaving off the .com at the end of the email address. The AI agent's going to create our ticket for us. It's going to read our ticket note, kind of get an idea of what we're asking it to do, ask a clarifying question here for us. And of course, once I respond and say exactly what I want it to do, I always find that if you use please, the AI is nicer to us too. Then it's going to go back and run the automation, and you'll see that just like that, we have a forwarding rule set up on the mailbox now. We've got a back-end workflow on the RPA side that handles this for us. I'm going to pause it right there so we can see that. Now, here's what's happening. Your user is submitting the request. In the past, you'd have a human that would read that ticket. They would go in and assign that ticket to someone on your team. It would sit in that person's queue until they got around to it. That person would set up the mail forward, then they'd notify your end user. That process could take hours, or in some cases days, depending on your service desk and depending on the priority of that ticket. In this case, the user submits the request, the AI read the ticket, the AI perceives the intent behind it, the AI initiates the automation, and then the automation resolves the ticket. So from a client experience perspective, our response time is about 15 seconds. And the total resolution time, including the automation performing the task, becomes 43 seconds. That's now what we're delivering to our clients by combining AI and automation. We still have our RPA tool in the background, but as you can clearly see, the process is much less complicated here. So a relatively streamlined process. We do have, in this particular case, we do have something set up so that we're not setting up external mail forward rules for security purposes. We're only doing internal forwards. But outside of that, it's a pretty basic process. Make sure we validate.
I'm glad you mentioned the internal forward. I'm sure all the cybersecurity people were tweaking when they saw, oh, we're automating forwards.
Yeah, and there's also an approvals process for this too. So I don't have that captured on the demo, but yeah, there's an approvals process, so that way someone is approving this request before it gets done.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we validate our inputs, right? We make sure the recipient exists. If they don't, we put that note in the ticket. We set up the rule, we update the ticket, we close the ticket out. Simple as that.
Yeah, and really what you're demonstrating is a little bit of experience of going through this process, right? And the things you need to look at that maybe you don't think of when you first think, how can I create something that can do this? But really, the trick is to have the AI in the right place and then have it know recognize which automation it can call and initiate, right? And who knows what that automation would be. You could create lots of them that the AI could recognize and then handle
Right.
for you, right? So
Yeah.
it's really showing a modality, but the point is whatever you have set that it can recognize and it can trigger it would be able to call upon and do, which is great.
Mhm. And this is actually another example of one of the automations that's in one of our thread workflow bundles that we provide for our partners.
And
Now,
I'm sorry, Skid. What I like about this, I just said, taste like we get our CSAT reports and we see when people give us the smiley face or the frowny face or whatever, and I love seeing the smiley faces coming through and people saying things like that was fast, that was amazing, and we can see on the back end that it was an AI resolved that ticket.
mhm,
And it's not that we're trying to get rid of all people interaction. I'd say quite the opposite, but we're trying to not let people getting to the problem get in the way of quick, easy fixes, as an example. And so the user's happy, and we're going to connect with them as a human in a different way. Meanwhile, this sort of kind of tedious work that takes longer than it should is getting banged out in less than a minute.
absolutely. You're taking something off the table so that your team can focus on the bigger issues,
Yeah.
And let's face it, we live in a world of instant gratification.
Yeah.
We need things done. We need them done right now. Everything's important. And when it comes to simple requests like this, no matter how good your experience is for your clients, the one piece of feedback our clients will always give us is it could always be done faster. And that's where AI and automation coming together really help drive that experience forward. Is it really helps satisfy that, hey, you could get this done faster. So let's talk about some of the pitfalls of doing it yourself versus purpose-built tools. And Karl, I'd really love some of your opinions on this, but when it comes to building your own tools, the single biggest advantage here is the flexibility. I mean, your ceiling is virtually non-existent. As long as you put forth the time and resources, you can literally build almost anything that you want. But the real potential downside here is the high risk, high reward nature of this. It definitely requires dedicated talent on your team. It requires a certain level of technical skill for doing this. And for many MSPs, when they're just starting out down this path, they can only dedicate one resource to doing this to start with. And if that resource leaves, that progress often leaves with them. So that's really where that high risk part of that comes into play. But the
Yeah, I mean,
limitless
we
potential.
we had an MSP come to us that their automation guy had left, and the owner didn't even know how to log in to see what they even had going. I mean, there's a pretty big disconnect there, right? But there can be a risk there for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think of all the use cases. It's actually a really common thing. They say, "Oh, my guy is no longer with us, so we're trying to figure out our strategy from here." It's an interesting thing. I think a lot of folks don't think about. I think the other part they miss is, sometimes we think, okay, we've created that automation, now it's done and off and running. But the reality of it is we find that as they go on, over time, that little things happen that cause that automation to not fire correctly all the time. So there is this maintenance, so that required dedicated talent to build, manage, and maintain. I think people really
Right.
miss the maintenance part of, and really part of it's how you design the automations. Did you think about error correction? Did you think about how to make it easy to know when things are or are not working and in what parts and all those kind of things? And it's a huge difference when you figure out how to do that. That's where this can be much more elegant, like system architecting, than simply you just build a tool and consume it, right? So
Mhm. Yeah, but you also have that other advantage, complete control of your tech stack and your data. When it comes to data governance and compliance, if you're
yeah,
building this and managing it yourself, you know exactly who has access. You're ultimately responsible for it too, though. So if you make a mistake, it does become your fault. You kind of own that, you know. Now, On the alternate side of that, purpose-built tools. So oftentimes you've got a much faster time to value here because you're not going back and reinventing the wheel. You know, you've got starting points that are already there. Though sometimes you are exchanging that faster time to value for the potential for more limited feature sets. You know, you may not have that same level of limitless potential, but if you're just getting started in your journey and you need to get something going, that might be a great way to start while you're learning how to build the tools that you need. You know, to your point about that whole vendor or that whole maintenance and monitoring of your solutions, when you're using purpose-built solutions from vendors, that maintenance often becomes the responsibility of that vendor. So you do kind of share that responsibility. But when it comes to data governance, you now do have to run through a due diligence process to ensure that that vendor is complying with your security policies. You know, so that's definitely something to consider. You know, when it comes to your talent perspective, yeah, depending on the solution, you may still need certain levels of talent, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have an internal developer. That vendor expertise can help ensure that you have things always up and running, but sometimes you are exchanging, you know, contract or commitment terms in order to have that peace of mind that you have things up and running. Karl, do you have any thoughts or insights on that?
Well, look, I mean, yeah, look, the buying versus building is a really big question. And I think ultimately, you know, when we started on this journey back in the day, Jared, you know, I feel like, and that's getting on, you know, 3-4 years now, something like that, since we kind of started. There actually wasn't a lot of buying tools for this kind of stuff, and so we did a lot of building our own, right? And saw all the benefits and the risks involved, right? And then as some tools have come to the table that really add to the mix, or even just vendors that we can work with that can help with these things, I find it's overall simpler and easier to maintain long term. And I also know that that vendor's going to want to stay relevant, and so they'll keep improving their product typically, or what they're offering.
Right.
And so I have a strong penchant actually towards the buying of the tool side of the house. The problem is the first thing that is my priority is getting the tasks done that I want to get done. And sometimes the purpose-built tools just don't line up good enough. They're just not ready. They can't do what I need. And so I would put in the effort to build my own. But in the grand scheme of things, I prefer more of a simple approach as much as possible and faster ROI. Those are all things that I would rather have. Just sometimes it's worth building it myself, worth having the staff to do it, you know. And so you know, I kind of think that in my land, I want to do both of these things, and I'm making point decisions as we go as to what makes sense for whatever task we're working on. I kind of see the benefits of both sides, but mostly I'm leaning towards the building my own when I feel like there isn't a good tool, or that tool is just not reliable, or it can't be cleared on due diligence. Those are the reasons why I would avoid the purpose-built tool scenario. But in general, things that are purpose-built that do exactly what I want, we can just turn on and we're working. We don't have to maintain and all that. I think that's a pretty big advantage if it works, you know.
Yeah, I mean, so that is a huge call out. I mean, if you go look at AI tools that are out there, there are literally new tools hitting the market every single day, and it's virtually impossible to keep up with what's out there. You know, so if you're not having these conversations with your clients, guarantee you someone's having those conversations with your clients. You
Well,
know,
or they're just out there just screwing around. Pardon my French. Uh,
absolutely, absolutely.
and who knows what they're doing intentionally or unintentionally, right? It's definitely the
Well,
Wild West right now.
this is a great segue for this next slide, actually. So how do you get started with
Oh,
your AI
yes.
journey? One of the very first things you need to do, Karl, I think you're probably the best suited to talk about this, is creating company policies like an acceptable use policy for AI tools. You want to share some insight here?
Yeah, look, I think there's every organization has to determine their own process and how they feel about the data that they involve and work with. I mean, and this can very much affect your approach to AI. It can also affect your costs to using AI because, for instance, you could be having everybody kind of on the side doing their own little chat GTP thing. And in that scenario, they're probably not using a private one. And that private one is probably what they're using is probably, using that data to train the AIs, and or that somehow could become exposed data. And so, I think one of the first things you have to do is, what are you responsible to? What have you contractually obligated that you won't share publicly? And you need to know that whatever AI you're using isn't going to expose you to liability or risks that you didn't intend to. We all want the benefits, but we need to be careful that we're doing it in a way. And I'll tell you right now, it can be done in a way that is secure. Sometimes that means like you're getting some type of enterprise or team account, and you're setting a private
Mhm.
process. Or, I think there's a lot to be said for what Microsoft's doing with the Copilot, because it has a natural barrier with the Microsoft Graph in that everything in your Office 365 is already sort of self-contained, and they're already giving you a built-in protection against unintentionally sharing data. Uh, so that there's a real advantage to that, but understanding the data security side of it and the liability risk is a big deal on acceptable use. I think the other problem is like, if everybody just keeps trying stuff, it's like going out and just trying any old app or any website thing. And it's already shown that there's a big trend towards AI hacking and AI attacks. And so you just have to be very careful. And so setting standards around like what tools we should be working on. And I also think, though, that we have to move quickly because new tools are going to come out and they're going to
Mhm.
have advantages over the previous tool. And so you need to have a methodology of who can test and how, and what kind of awareness you need to have to do it. And so it's a fast moving thing, but if you're not communicating and coordinating with your team, you're probably introducing risks that you didn't intend to. And you're also creating little silos to ensure that if that person just changes their mind or does something different, whatever thing you put together or did is just gone. Very much like we're talking about in automation in general. If you're an MSP trying to have that person do that, you have the same risk within your own business. Is that which you don't find a way to institutionalize somehow is not going to live past an individual who's doing it, and that can be
Absolutely.
pretty problematic. And so picking your tools, knowing what's acceptable, making sure your people are aware of it, these are pretty critical things in your strategy. One other thing, just kind of put in the back of people's head. Let's say, for instance, you went ahead and licensed AI, and somebody on your team had some pretty important number crunching they wanted to do, maybe on your company payroll or some benefits or something like that. And suddenly somebody else gets added to the AI without really thinking through the change control, and you didn't really do a good job on your data security side. Suddenly they're able to query and ask questions like what people are getting paid because that got fed into the AI system, right? And so these are just examples, like you may be exposing data even just internally to other employees that they really shouldn't have access to if you don't really think through the data side of the strategy. And so AI is amazing. Just be careful and make sure you understand what you're doing and introducing, and that your people are educated, and that you've made it clear what is acceptable and not acceptable. So it's a new form of acceptable use policy. And look, we have customers that take all sorts of angles. Some say no AI, we're uncomfortable. We don't feel like it meets our compliance standards, for instance, or the risk of putting our customer data out there is not worth it. Others take a more moderate approach of some forms of AI is allowed and some are not. And then some are just out there freewheeling it. And, they may be getting interesting, cool things, but I would say in the long term, it's kind of short sighted. They haven't really thought how they're going to make this thing live and work as an actual processing system for them. It's more like a toy, if you ask me, the way they approach it.
Right. Well, whether you think you're using AI or you're not, you're using AI because your people are using it in some capacity.
That's a really great way to put it. It is happening. And well, frankly, it's getting built into everything too, which,
Mhm.
pretty great in a lot of ways. And, when it comes from the
Absolutely.
vendor, you would hope that they've done the right work to make sure that you're pretty safe using it inside of their product, as an example. The real key is, can you create these additional systems or connect these things that are not built to connect to each other? That's that integration piece that is just an amazing enablement and an amazing efficiency piece. Anytime you have somebody like reading an email and then manually putting that data somewhere else, or looking at one screen to find out what to do somewhere else, that's where this stuff really gets into the efficiency piece. The built-in stuff inside of applications is great and a lot of cool things, but it's this connecting disparate systems that I find both fascinating, and also I think is where the real gold is too.
Who knows? So yeah, after you've got your policies created, you got to educate your team on those policies and make sure you're talking about the risks. And after you get through that piece, how do you get started working with AI? Start getting your team to start using generative AI solutions like Copilot or ChatGPT. It's pretty easy to start building things like SOPs, KB articles, things like that for your own internal use. Great way to get people more comfortable using it internally. You can take those things, post them to IT Glue or Hoodoo or whatever you're using for documentation. I can tell you personally, I use ChatGPT all the time internally to help me create SOPs for our team. It saves me tons of time,
Yeah.
So you had mentioned Copilot here before I had my audio issues pop up. I wanted to give a call out here because if you remember when Copilot first came around, it wasn't necessarily the greatest thing out there. But I do want to make a call out that Microsoft has made some significant changes to Copilot. It used to be that when you first turned on Copilot for an environment, it could take months for that tenant to start to be initialized and for it to ingest everything in the environment. But Microsoft is doing that in the background now, so that when you turn Copilot on for the first time, it's ready to go on day one. So keep that in mind if you're not using Copilot for your clients, that it is much more impactful right away now than it ever was before.
Well, and not only that is, they've already released their GPT-5 integration, and so you can be querying GPT-5 right from Copilot. And then Microsoft has this built-in security piece that you don't have to think as much about. You do internally still need to make sure that you're protecting between your own employees seeing something you don't want, but the sending private client information out to train and be publicly available to the AIs is a natural built-in protection. I just never count an organization like Microsoft out, and don't forget, OpenAI as an organization is the largest single AI provider, and Microsoft is a prominent and very large investor there as well. I would say they sort of get into frenemy status sometimes because OpenAI serves other markets as well. But between Microsoft and OpenAI, it's like a market domination at some level when you really see the statistics. But I just would never count Microsoft out. But yeah, there's no doubt they've made some recent great additions. Like you said, the getting it ready on day one, the new deep research things, the new analyst agents that just come with it, the new create section that kind of does the whole photo and video creation things and presentation, those kind of things. Copilot was lacking and behind on, and I feel like they're catching up very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also worth noting that if you have a Microsoft partnership, there is an absolutely ridiculous sum of MDF dollars that are available through Microsoft for having things like Copilot readiness assessments or doing trainings around Copilot with your clients. Raven itself doesn't sell Microsoft licensing, so we don't have a Microsoft partnership in that regard. So I can't give you all of the details around that. Karl, I'm not sure if you can shed any more insight there. But that's definitely something that you should consider looking at, for your MSP with your Microsoft partnership.
Yeah, I think some of your microphone journey might be still going on. I heard you that time, but they're starting to get some clipping. So if there's any adjustment you can make regarding that, you may not hear that that's happening. But as far as the partnership piece, yeah, look, I think it's like as far as Microsoft's concerned, it feels like if you're not getting on the Copilot train, it's going to be hard to be a Microsoft partner. And I just suppose that's the way, the nature of the beast of how things are going. It's an all integrated picture. There's a lot of benefit to it, but if you're uncomfortable and don't want to take the Copilot plunge, you'll probably find yourself technologically deprecated pretty soon on your approach. It feels like it's coming really fast. I wouldn't count Microsoft out at all. And I think there's some pretty good advantages we've been able to introduce to customers in an MSP that I'm affiliated with as well. But the cool thing that what we're doing here at Raven though is we're working with lots of IT providers and folks out there providing, and so we're seeing kind of all flavors. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. And if you're not focused on how you're proposing and putting this in front of your customers, somebody else is. So
For sure. All right. So how do we start to sell AI to our clients? First of all, you don't try to sell it on an abstract basis. As with anything, we've got to start to tie these things back to outcomes. So when it comes down to it, again, on the co-pilot train, productivity enablement's huge. Talking about that generative AI capability, leveraging RPA tools to automate specific business processes. Help your clients predict or help them understand what those processes are. Consider AI readiness assessments. These are great opportunities to evaluate what the workflow looks like. I guarantee that if you sit and talk with one of your clients about one of their business processes, what they think the process looks like does not actually match what the process is. And after you go through that conversation and you map out that process with them, you'll find areas where you can automate that process. You may not be able to fully automate every step of the way. There may be still reasons to have a human element in that process for a check and balance of some sort. We'll take like a finance process as an example. There may still be great reason to have a human review an invoice before an invoice is sent out. But you could absolutely automate the process of collecting all of the billing counts and all of those things and updating the agreement and generating the invoice and then having the human review it before they send it to the customer.
I think there's a lot of use cases that end up like that, and it's important to be able to talk to your customer about that. There always the question is, I think it's like the simple assumption is, well, AI is going to replace my workforce, and I think in some fields specifically, it really is potentially reducing workforce. I don't see it in like IT support as reducing workforce. Like I've never felt like in the MSP I'm affiliated with that we're going to reduce headcount over this, but we are doing is getting a lot more done and a lot more done fast and reliably and happier customers. So, and I would say like in our journey, we've had moments where customers get frustrated with the AI and we've had to have good learning about like when we introduce and when we don't. The reality of it is there's an appetite for this. Our customers are knocking down our door to ask us, like, how can we do this? What do we need to know? The AI readiness assessment is terrific. I think for us, a big part of that is just looking at the security side of it and comparing to what they want from a data standpoint. I think we leverage it right into a workflow mentality too, where we're getting in and helping them like really actually visualize the reality of their process and then helping them understand how we can improve it, make it more efficient with either RPA or AI or the combination of both. So to me, like it's more than just assessment, it's assessment and workshop. Because the customers oftentimes have not visualized this or defined it in a way that it can simply be taken into technology and knocked out. And then there's this wisdom component of knowing what is the right one to go after in what order and what a person should do versus AI, right? But there's no doubt that there is just a huge appetite out there for customers to immediately say, that sounds really good. I'd love to figure out how to do it. And they literally have no idea where to start. And so there's just an immense opportunity. This reminds me of when in the IT industry, we first started talking about BCDR or BDR, I guess sometimes called devices for backup to get away from the tape dynamic and all the advantages of that with instant on recovery, virtualization, or really into the cybersecurity realm. There's those that would talk about cybersecurity. It was a buzzword. Or once again, the cloud adoption. Vendors saying everything's going to cloud. It really took a lot longer to get there practically, but we're definitely there now. And so there's this whole world of can you use the AI buzzword and everybody's using it. But this whole practical approach is what clients really need. And I'm telling you, it's like AI alone is not the answer. AI and RPA is where the real answer is, because that's where you're really going to put full cycle action into place of meaningful things getting done that are not just telling you what to do or not just interacting. AI is impressive, but it's combining with RPA that is the real gold to me.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about the governance side of things. Keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to understand and control every aspect of the data for your client. When we start talking about using AI in your clients' businesses, we really need to control the governance for those specific pieces of data that the AI is going to touch and manipulate. You know, we all understand that mapping out every single touch point for every piece of data and handling the classification for all data types for your clients is an incredibly monumental task. It's an overwhelming task in many cases. But when we're talking about how to implement AI, if we're starting small and we're focusing on a very specific use case, we don't necessarily have to consider the governance for all data classification, just the data classification that we're working with. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think one of the mentalities people have is I'm going to go out and find my AI solution. The reality of it is by the time we're done with this, well, I don't know we're ever done with it, but by the time it's like meaningfully indoctrinated in our cultures and it's regularly used and all that kind of stuff, we'll probably all have several AI tools we use in different areas and different reasons and different things. And I think that's far more important. I think this is why this whole process and customer outcome focus is far more important. But this whole idea of taking it a bite at a time in what you can understand will get you way further along than trying to find some elegant, all-encompassing, I've got my AI strategy in place. You know, it's more like I've got my AI strategy in place for accounts receivable as an example. And then how can you go find the next one and the one after that and begin to build a library of this? There's definitely added complexity when you do that. There really has to be an understanding of how you're approaching it and all the things you're doing. But at the same token, it's far more practical and far more usable today.
Yeah, and that strategy cannot be static. It has to change.
Right.
You know, it has to be able to adapt. You know, Carl, I know that you're not really as into football as I am, but I'm a football fan. You know, if you're calling an offensive play and you see the defense is lined up in a certain formation, you may need to call an audible. You know, it is what it is. But our strategy needs to be able to adapt to whatever the conditions are on the market. As all of these AI tools are rolling out constantly, the best tool today may not be the best tool tomorrow. So we need to understand that and constantly be evaluating as well.
Yeah, it's really true. There's a lot. I think that's one of the things, like we all have such busy lives. So much information is coming at us. Like it's like, to me, it's like a whole philosophically interesting connection about how our brains are even going to work. Because I don't know that we were built to have this much constant information. But I think part of that leads us to this kind of instant gratification mentality and this whole thought process of like, I did this, now I'm done. Things like choice made, or I bought this product and this, and now problem solved. And it just doesn't take that need to manage, maintain, operate, operationalize. That's all the real magic of this, is how you think of this systematically and culturally in your company, in your organization, and how you think through the risk side of it and the production, the communication, the enablement, the alignment with your team. That's the real journey. This is also true of cybersecurity. You have to think culture of it. This is true of like thinking cloud first, as an example. These are all big technology shifts that happen. This one is bigger than all of those combined, and it's just no doubt it's going to permeate all aspects of our life, ways you can't even imagine yet. And it's just, if you're not thinking this way, it's just wow. It's like the folks that think I'm not going to do cybersecurity, but I'm going to do IT. It just feels like it'll be off the table pretty quick. You just won't have opportunities.
The truth of the matter is, if you're not having conversations about AI with your clients, you're going to be putting your business at risk because someone else is going to come in and have those conversations.
Yeah, well, I think that's enough said on that. But the point is like, I think everybody gets that. In fact, I don't find I really have to convince people of this. Once you say it, like, yeah, that makes sense, and I think that too. I think the real question is like, how do I start? And just know your customers want that conversation. So be thinking about how you're engaging them.
So yeah, let's talk about that. On the one hand, you can absolutely take this journey on your own. But if you don't want to take the journey on your own and you want to have a partner, Raven is here. We can help you with that. Partner with Raven. We can help you generate a faster ROI. We have a library of existing automations. We're experts in the Roost platform. We've got multiple service options that are available for pretty much any need that you have. Our automation catalog has over 70 automations and counting. We constantly have new things in R&D. As you can see, we've got a list of some of the most popular things that are requested by our partners, both that are pure RPA, many that are also functions that work with one of our other partners, Thread.
Yeah, I just think that like some of the things that we're building into some of our plans are pretty powerful things, like the tech toolkit that is coming up and going to have all sorts of things added to it as we go, as just an amazing technician enabler where they still look at things and see and make a decision on something's happening, but then when it comes to doing, it's just clicking a couple buttons to initiate an automation instead of going and logging in and authenticating and then typing in all this stuff to then make it happen, right? It's just there's so many cool things that I love what we're doing, and like I wouldn't say there's any specific magic to it. We've put in the time, we have the expertise, we've done it, we've seen it work in action, we've sort of caught the problems and figured out how to resolve them. So there's wisdom in what we put together, and there's a lot of time saving in what we put together. And so whether you want to think about, hey, I want to just enable my team for a period of time with some help, or I want somebody to back us up, or I just want to pull from the collective wisdom that we put together as an organization. There's a lot of advantages to it. This is definitely, from my perspective, the partnering piece should help you get to ROI much quicker, should help you move your strategy forward faster is the idea. And we're finding customers of all ilk, those that have dedicated automation teams, or those that don't have anybody internally and they're just looking to get some of it on the board with their customers. We see all realm that we're having success with in this process. It's pretty exciting.
Yep, and Karl, I just approved development of 2 new AI agents today. So we've got some more new things coming.
Yeah.
If you're interested in working with us, we've got multiple plan options available depending on whatever your budgets are for automation and AI. For us, it's not about the individual hours. Again, it's about the outcomes for your business. Karl's already mentioned that we have our Tech Toolbox portal that's available for use for your technicians and can also be made available for your co-managed clients for downstream usage.
Yeah, that's great.
If you're interested in working with us, here's an opportunity. Use this QR code. You can book a call with us. We're happy to go over the options, show you more, and talk to you, help you build a strategy that works for you and your business. And with that,
yeah, terrific. Well, if either, look, either way, whether you engage us or not, hopefully you got some value or some thoughts or something made you think I need to go look and dig into this. Feel free to engage with us in social media. Feel free to come to future webinars. We'll keep putting content out there, and maybe one day it makes sense we engage. We'd love to hear more and learn more. We like to share in the industry, participate in our community, so you'll find us on other calls, other conferences. You just putting the word out there. We like to see what people are doing, and then we turn it into something we can provide to our customers as well. So feel free to reach out, and maybe there's a use case that makes sense.
Yeah, stay tuned. This is part 1 of a 4-part series that we'll be doing for the rest of the year as we dive deeper into the world of AI and automation. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Karl, appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me on this as well. I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon.
Take care, everybody.